And hello, everyone. I'm Don Zavis, and welcome to Smiley's Secrets of Success. We really appreciate you being here for our inaugural podcast. We've got a lot of great shows coming up, a lot of great content. Unfortunately, I am kind of the color commentary today. However, the words of wisdom will come from Mr. Sean Smiley. So how are you, Sean?
Fantastic. We're excited to be here at our inaugural podcast.
Our inaugural podcast. Well, if you don't exist in the digital media, you don't exist. And
that's exactly
since our goal is to exist and very heavily exist, we want to be here. And we've got a wonderful concept for you. The concept of the show, and if you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, business owner, whether you've got 5 employees or 5,000 employees, our focus is primarily going to be on interesting and sometimes unknown ways to make money. You know, there's so many options out there in the world, and most people kind of look at their, in their lanes or, between their borders as the only way that they can do it. And the reality is that there are hundreds of ways. And we also talk about in our private lives, the fact that you want to have money coming in from lots of different revenue streams.
Absolutely.
It's not just, where you work or one thing. You want to have dollars coming in from lots and lots of different places. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to share with you a little bit about us, what we do and how we do it. And so, Mr. Smiley, would you like to share with the world a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my background, I graduated from Yale with a degree in applied math. My real first job coming out of college, that first boss really helped me understand that we're all selling all the time. And I had never desired to be in sales, never thought about being in sales. In fact, I actually didn't want to be in sales. And he really helped me see that no matter what we're doing, we're trying to get our point across. We're
absolutely
trying to convince our family members where to go for dinner, whatever it might be. So early on, I made the decision that I really did want to become an expert in sales, and pursued a lot of different jobs and career paths, all related in that. And that really brings us to where we are today.
Yeah.
And
literally brings us together. So my background, I don't know if it's maybe as direct. I'm by practice a sales trainer and sales coach. Prior to getting into that, I used to buy and sell companies. And what I realized, and we'll talk about in our upcoming shows, is that there's that X factor that all of the 23 companies I bought and sold, only one was actually for sale. All the rest of them weren't even for sale, but there was something about them that kind of fell into my radar and ultimately my desire to get into that industry. I should also mention, by the way, our sponsor, because everything revolves around sponsorships. Our sponsor is ERC Junction, which is an employee retention credit company. If you're familiar with the CARES Act and you haven't pursued your employee retention credit refund, I strongly encourage you to reach out to us. Our contact information will be on our podcast here. We'll be happy to tell you more about that. So, it's interesting when you talk about entrepreneurship or the fact that there's this secondary economy that is out in the world that most people never realize. They go to work, they get their W-2, and as far as they're concerned, this is it. Or you own a business and you go to work every day, and there are all these myriads of ways to make money that are out there that most people, I don't think, really realize that even exist.
I think that's true.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, the content that we're going after. And I have a couple in mind that I'd like to kind of share with the audience, even though this is kind of our inaugural episode, if that's acceptable. Yeah,
well, one of the things that you and I've talked about before, I think you've got great insight in, is the whole barter organization.
Yes.
Idea.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
I would be happy to. So if you think of barter, barter is the absolutely longest form of human transaction ever in history, right? I have a sheep, you have grain. I have more sheep than I need. You have more grain than you need. I'll trade you one of my extra sheep. You give me some of your extra grain. So the first currency or the first interaction was barter organizations. And then through the passage of time, as money and currency became developed, then it became currency. However, the barter concept really never ended. And it's interesting because in my professional world, when I'm talking to a client that maybe is having money problems or is having financial issues, and I'll ask them, have you ever considered barter as a means of getting the critical stuff you need? And I always kiddingly say this, you'll hear me say this a lot. It was as if I showed them fire for the first time. So I would take them to and there are literally hundreds of barter associations throughout not only the globe, but certainly here in the United States.
So is this the kind of thing where a doctor swaps services with a dentist, or tell me, would it be a little more specific?
Functionally, yes, but they don't do it. So in the example I gave of the sheep and the grain, you and I would be doing it personally. But there were situations where I would have that extra sheep and maybe I didn't need your grain. So the barter organization were created as the wirehouse, as the clearinghouse of how these things would come in. So as a sales trainer or sales coach, people will come to me and maybe they're struggling financially. So they don't necessarily want to write a check, even though ultimately it's probably a good idea because I can help them make more money. But the idea would be they don't want to write a check. And that's why, my company makes no distinction between barter dollars and regular dollars. We view them exactly the same. But it's really an issue of capacity. So for our listeners, if you think of it like this, you're a plumber. Your goal is to get paid for 40 hours a week, right? That's your goal, is to have somebody write you a check for 40 hours in a week. However, if despite your best effort, you can only get 30 hours actually paid, well, now you have 10 additional hours to do something with. If that additional capacity was put in a trade organization, these trade dollars that are generated are actual dollars. So if you needed to buy tires for your car, you could go there and you could find a tire person, you could give them a check and say, here you go, we're paid. Or you can go to a tire organization that actually participates in your barter program. And now that $600 worth of tires is deducted from your trade account, your trade dollar account, and is put into their trade account. And they can use it to buy copy paper at the local office supply company. They can use it at restaurants. But the real value comes in the capacity. And I think that's where people make a distinction between what we call buying power, which is really what the functional aspects of trade are, and cash dollars that are paid. I would never substitute barter dollars for actual dollars. However, if I have additional time and despite my best efforts, I can't find somebody to actually write me a check, then I'm absolutely going to go after the barter.
But you said a minute ago that you treat them exactly the same.
I do. We treat them in terms of income. So the reason, and so I'll give an explanation on that. There are some people, some organizations that even within the barter organization that look negatively on it. They much prefer cash as opposed to the dollars. And to that end, we don't make that decision.
Well, it sounded like that's what you were just saying.
Well, we don't in terms of the distinction of how money comes in. What I was saying in terms of the capacity is that if the goal in the plumber example was to get paid for 40 hours. But if despite your best efforts, you can only get paid for 30 hours, well, then you want to do something with the other 10. You have that additional capacity, and that's where the barter will come in. And by the way, I should also mention, it's not just that. It's trips. It's expensive jewelry. I've seen cars bought and sold through this. There's this whole secondary economy that most people don't realize. And since our show is kind of focused in this entrepreneurial, alternative financial world and things like that, if you've really never looked into a barter or trade organization, I absolutely suggest that you do. They're an absolute windfall, and they're virtually of the marketplace, they're expanding vastly. Now
so you've got here in Arizona, how many are you a member of?
Well, one primary one in Arizona. So even though I'll gladly give you the name, it's called iTrade. It's out of Phoenix. It's a very large organization. So there's lots and lots and lots of members.
Nationwide?
We do have connections nationwide. So what a lot of these barter organizations will do, the individual regional ones will connect up with ones that are in other regions to give the opportunity. So for example, if I want to go to a hotel in California, there are barter networks in California that work reciprocally with our barter network here in Arizona, and I can use my barter dollars there. And the people in California can ultimately use their barter dollars here. So, and there are some national organizations that are there. But the interesting thing about it is it enables you to keep your cash in your pocket, which in my estimation is exactly where it should be. So, I will generally look for a barter provider before I'm going to look for a cash provider. And there are so many different ones. And as I said, so many different ones throughout the country that if you haven't looked into it, or even if you did look into it years ago, I'm going to strongly encourage you to look into it now, because a lot of the changes, especially kind of post-COVID, that have happened in the barter world have really been significant. A lot of companies that really never saw that as part, of their overall selling program.
So are these going to be most attractive, or will it make most sense for another entrepreneur who owns a business, or just an employee?
Well, yeah, the employee unfortunately can't commit the company.
Okay.
All right. So what you're going to find is if it's a business, generally it's the business owner, because they're ultimately the ones that are going to have to make a decision.
Right.
Because, you know, if there's not going to be a check in the cash register, you know, he's going to have to make sure whatever your trade dollars or whatever you're putting in is in fact acceptable. Really, it's the solopreneurs and the self-starters and a lot of the individuals are really what makes up probably the meat of most trade organizations, because again, these are people that have additional capacity, and despite their best efforts, again, they haven't been able to fill up the capacity, but they still want buying power.
Right.
So if if you're that plumber and you do a $600 job and you go buy tires for $600, or you take $600 worth of trade dollars and you go to that exact same retailer and you give them $600 of your trade dollars, you didn't have to take that money out of your pocket.
Right.
Now that retailer now has 600 additional dollars. So he can go to the local restaurant, he can go to the office supply store, and now he doesn't have to take money out of his pocket to buy whatever it is that they have. So that secondary economy of the trade world is really one that's incredibly robust and often overlooked.
So I can see where it would make great sense for somebody like yourself. You're selling services. You're not selling products like tires, right, or bicycles.
Yes.
So you can value your time at $30 an hour or $3,000 an hour, right? So when you put that into the trade network, if it's $1,000 an hour that you're charging,
right,
you can rack up a lot of trade dollars quickly.
Well, you can. And although the trade dollars are not regulated for the service provider, so they would never come to me and say, well, you can't charge $1,000 an hour. But there are certain parameters that trade falls into. So for example, if you're in an industry that would normally discount something, it's frowned upon if you don't provide the discount and trade dollars.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So, like on the tires, do you find that the tires are often marked up higher than they would be
I haven't found
if you
that.
paid cash?
Yeah, I haven't found that. And the reason being is most of the people that participate in trade and barter realize the value of it. And what they want is something that they don't necessarily have. If I've got 50 tires sitting there, right, I've got 49 tires that I can certainly sell for cash. But that one tire that I sell for trade now gives me dollars that I don't have to take money out of my pocket. And I think that's the real thing that was in there. I'll give you an example, because you're right. At one point in time, I racked up a lot of trade dollars. And there was a young lady that was a masseuse. And worked in your house. So she actually brought her tables and everything, very competent, very trained. My wife, Janet, has some health challenges. So she benefits from this. There was a period of time where she was getting a massage in our house every single week for probably the better part of 6 months. Now, I don't care how much money you have, right? Most people don't have the income to sustain that. However, these were dollars that I got that I didn't have to pay my cable bill with. I wasn't making a car insurance payment. I'm not making a mortgage payment. This is, I hate to use the word fun money, but because it was money that was outside of the normal monies that I need to live. It was the fun money. So I didn't care if she did this every week or every month. People take trips, go to maybe nicer restaurants, buy jewelry, clothes, expensive purses. I mean, it truly is amazing what's available out there right now. And that's why that we talk about these alternative forms of income, or we talk about alternative ways to make money. Certainly for our inaugural one, this is one that is so overlooked, but a lot of people have heard about it. They've heard about trade organizations, and for whatever reason, either made the decision that it wasn't for them without fully understanding it, or weren't in a position where they wanted to get it. There was something about it that was disincentivizing to them. It's been my experience, however, that it's absolutely been wonderful.
Well, I love this idea, because so much of what we want to communicate through this is how to help people get from one stream of income to multiple. And so this is an easy step forward to be able to add something else.
Oh, absolutely.
And like you said, take advantage of that excess capacity.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example, which I think is interesting, that many of the trade organizations, if you're a substantive legitimate business, will give you, upon joining, a certain credit of trade dollars. So say, for example, we'll go back to that tire example. You have to buy tires, they're $600. You can charge card, write a check, give them cash, whatever, but you're taking the money out of your pocket. When you join certain trade organizations, they'll give you a certain amount of money up front. So they might give you a $1,000 credit line on your trade organization. You would then take that $1,000 and you would buy the very tires at that point in time that you would normally have to pay $600 in cash yourself. And this is generally, it's kind of that priming the pump that a lot of the trade organizations, they want you to do a transaction. They want you to understand. Now, they do make a very small portion.
I was going to say, how do they get paid?
Yeah, depending on what it is, most of them somewhere in that 10%. So, for example, if you bought $600 worth of tires, that you would be, as a buyer, you'd be responsible for 10%. The seller pays nothing, right? The buyer does, because the buyer's initiating it. But if you're thinking about it, you get your tires, essentially, you took $60 in cash out of your pocket. Now you do have, at that point in time, a $600 negative balance in your trade account, but you can easily absorb that through just normal transactions of that additional capacity.
So the $60 has to get paid in cash to the trade organization.
Yeah. And again, that's why, so they act as the intermediary, the kind of the clearinghouse. And that's really the way it's been since the modern barter organizations have come. When they stopped being, here's my sheep, I'm going to take your wheat.
Right.
Then you had to go into a collective pool. So our dollars go into a collective pool. They come out of a collective pool. But the interesting thing is when you get involved in trade organizations and you utilize them properly, if I spend $2,000, $3,000 a month in a trade relationships, and usually there are things that I would have ultimately had to buy for cash. So if I buy something from the office supply store, I would then have to buy cash with it. Printing. I get all my printing done through my trade organizations and my trade relationships.
You think the cost of that printing is about what it would be if you paid cash?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we really monitor that to make sure internally, and I'll periodically compare, right? They're going to charge me $300 to do it here. I'll check it here locally and it's, $2.96. Right. I found it to be very competitive. And I'm competitive as well.
How many organizations or businesses do you think are members here in Arizona?
Oh, thousands.
Okay.
Thousands through them. And that's only, and they're connected with other networks that have thousands. So you're talking about a national, and on top of it, probably there's 60 or 70 major ones in the major cities. So it's kind of of our parting comment for today. If you're not part of a trade organization, but you're looking for a way to get what you need, but at the same time, not have to take cash out of your pocket, a quick Google search, trade organization, barter organization, Raleigh, North Carolina. And there's a good chance that if you're in a major city, you likely have one. Mm-hmm. And what I always encourage you to do is just call them. Call them. Say, I don't really know much about it. Can you explain to me what yours is? And they do, it's been my experience, they do a great job explaining that. So,
well, I get the sense that there are, we offer, right? We, in a sense, kind of a cliche almost that, most people who aren't wealthy, most poor people have one stream of income. Mm-hmm. Most wealthy people have many.
Yes.
And this is a great kind of first step forward. That's our goal here, is to be able to share
absolutely
a lot of these ideas as this podcast continues. So I also get the sense that a lot of really wealthy people probably were already doing this anyway, and they may not even know to join the organization. So they may, like I gave the example of a doctor and a dentist. Well, yes. I get the sense that those kind of people are probably already bartering unofficially. And this may be an opportunity for them to really
here in Tucson,
make it a bigger connection.
Yeah, there's actually 3 dentists in Tucson that participate in that trade organization.
Okay.
There's a Barter Tucson, which is another trade organization right here in Tucson, which has that. So doctors and dentists and lawyers and virtually everyone, any capacity you could imagine is likely represented in the barter and trade world.
Okay.
And when we talk about multiple streams of income, it wasn't an accident that I suggested this on today's kind of,
right.
Smiley success secrets. And even though I'm talking more than I normally ever will, this is Mr. Smiley's. But this needs absolutely positively to be one of your streams, because it does a couple things. You have additional capacity. It gives you another venue to sell. So if you sell podcasting, right, and somebody wants to buy podcasting, they're likely going to go to the network and say, who the network does podcasting available on trade. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're obligated to do 100% trade. Some people do a portion in trade, a portion in cash. Some do 100% in trade. Some do, trade for the services, but if they have to buy equipment or something like that,
like a plumber,
yeah, like the plumber. So if he has to go out and buy pipes and stuff, he'll likely, pass through the cost for cash.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
But the things that he's doing, he's likely going to do it. Well, you as a consumer, so fine, you pay $50 for pipe. But the $400, you don't have to take cash out of your pocket for the service. So that's kind of the inside baseball. I don't want to complicate it but I do encourage everyone who's listening, take a look, do that search, find someone in your local area. If you have a question, you're welcome to reach out to Sean or I. I'll be happy to talk to you about that. I'll be happy to direct you to the people here locally in Tucson and in Arizona, and I'm sure that they can give you some wings to go with. So, Mr. Smiley, any
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, again, our focus here is going to be on helping all of our listeners to learn how to get from one stream of income, or maybe they have more than one, to multiple, because that's, as we've often heard, wealthy people do.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to say thank you again to ERC Junction, our sponsor.
Absolutely.
You could reach me there at Sean, SEAN, Sean at ERCjunction.com. And my mobile number, you can call me directly, is 520-576-3524.
I got to make one pitch, by the way, for Shauna. So Sean's daughter, Shavana, is actually a wonderful artist who's done these things behind us, and she is absolutely so incredibly talented. If you like these, this is just a sampling of the amazing things that she's done. So we'll kind of highlight some of her different pieces as things go on. So,
and that's another of our income streams.
It's another stream of income. Yep. I wasn't going to say that.
We'll talk about that on another day.
Shameless though I may be. And you are right on one thing, and maybe this would be literally my parting comment. People that have gained wealth get it in a lot of different streams. You look at the Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods only made a fraction, and actually the smallest fraction of his personal money from golf, from the PGA. It was Nike and Buick and personal appearance and all these other things. So when one turns on, one turns off. So the things that I'm going to bring to you will generally have little or no cost. They historically are actionable, right? That you can do immediately. That's why I'm encouraging you to reach out to the trade organizations, and if we can help in any way. So,
well, thank you for being here and listening to us today on this inaugural episode of Smiley's Secrets of Success.
The pilot episode. You can say you saw us when. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.